Okay, we're going to use the MCD. Remember, that measures condyle displacement. And we're going to use the MCD to measure the change from centric relation position of the condyle. That is the best centric we could achieve today with our power centric bites, and that the change from centric relation to centric occlusion when we made our centric occlusion record. So we want to see what happens to the condyles in that change from centric relation to centric occlusion. To do that, we'll use the MCD instrument. The first thing you want to do with the MCD instrument is to put a very, very thin coat of separating medium lubricant on the flags. I'm using Aquaphor. I like Aquaphor because it's water soluble, and you want to put the thinnest coat possible on. So you put it on, and then you take a Kleenex and you wipe it off real good. So you have a very, very thin coat of separating medium. If you have too much separating medium, the flag that we're going to put on here will tend to move a little bit. If you don't use separating medium, sometimes the glue on the back of the flags will come off on the condyle blocks. So I'm putting a little separating medium on. And it's, as I say, it's Aquaphor. And then I'm going to wipe it off. Also, when you put the flags on the MCD, you don't want to leave the flags on a long time. Don't leave them sit there for a week or several days, because again, the glue will come off on the plates. We want to also be sure to take off the little rubber protector here to measure the transverse measurement. So we take that off, and we put a little Aquaphor on the transverse measurement too. If we look at the flag very closely, you see that there's a heavy center line. That line will line up with the line on the MCD plate here. And you have to be very careful in making this, placing this flag. You can see where the lines line up now, and you see it says where we have a right shift and a left shift. The left shift here, the right shift here. It's on opposite sides of the instrument, because when we actually do the MCD, the top of the instrument is moving, not the bottom. You can see the little window, and you look through the window to line up on the horizontal line, and the vertical line you line up so you can see the crosshairs, the heavy lines on the flag, and you line up the vertical line by looking at the edge of the graph paper. See the windows there, how you can see the horizontal line through the windows. in the right side. Now you can see that the graph paper vertically doesn't cover the entire condyle block, so that you can see the vertical line on the block, and you can line it up with the vertical line, center vertical line on the graft. And then the horizontal line you can see through the window. Each of these little squares is a millimeter measurement. And on the transverse measurements, each line is a millimeter. And the transverse measurement is really the most critical, so I like to do the transverse measurement first. So first I'm going to have to take my models off the articulator and transfer them to the MCD. Almost too strong for me. One of the most critical phases of doing the MCD is seating the models correctly into the wax bites. If you don't get the models seated correctly, then your measurements are going to be wrong. We want to move the anterior pin out of the way so it doesn't interfere with the seating. And the way I like to do this is to put the CO bite on our upper model. Seated on the upper model. Don't press hard because at this point in time. And notice how I cut the bite so that it did not extend back and hit the maxillary tuberosities. That's very important. Now take your lower model and invert it and put it in so that you can see exactly where you're seating the lower model. If you try to do it this way, you can see exactly how the teeth go into the wax CO bite. Now you want to make sure it's really seated good, because remember we had our patient bite firmly into the CO bite. So we want our models seated firmly into the CO bite. So I'm going to get directly over the models and I'm going to seat it with some pressure into that CO bite. At the same time, I'm going to release the pen and stabilize the system. Now then, I can touch the system between these 2 points and it's stable. If I try to go back behind, if I touch back here, it'll lift out. So I can work and stabilize everything from this point to this point. Now, we're going to, as I said, the transverse measurement is the most critical, so I'm going to do it first. I'm going to take the tape where I've taped it down, take that off. Red, I use red to measure CR, or record CR. So I have the red articulating paper in. I'm going to raise the plate up. And give just a little pull. And if you look, you really have to zoom in on this very carefully. But if you look very carefully, you'll see that the red dot is about 1/10 of a millimeter to this side of the center line. So she doesn't have much transverse shift of the condyles when she closes into CO. If you want to, you can stabilize the model just by taking a hold of it. You can then put your paper in and use your finger here to bring the condyle block out, like so. Tap it and give a little bit of a pull, and you get your red dot. I'm going to make it a little heavier so the camera can see it. Again, there's hardly any discrepancy. It's down about 1/2 millimeter and back about 1/2 millimeter. You see, this is the crosshairs is our CR. So theoretically, if we put our flags on exactly right, and remember I said everything in this MCD is made to correspond with the axis of the articulator. And so if my flags are on exactly right, her condyle, when she puts her teeth into centric occlusion, on the left side is displaced inferiorly 1/2 millimeter and posteriorly 1/2 millimeter. So now we'll do the right side to articulate and pay for him. Bring it over, little pull. Bring it over. Bring it over. And there you can see that she's right on CR. And so that's the way you do your MCD. You do your condylar measurement. For checking, I'm going to put the CR bite on and measure this CR bite and see where it comes out relative to the flags. So again, we'll go through the same procedure of putting our wax bites on the upper model because we can see better to seat the lower model into the bites. Make sure the condyle blocks are moved all the way in, out of the way. Kind of tape that down again so the vertical plate doesn't get in the way. Get over it tightly. Hold it and drop the, hold it, drop the pin. Again, that stabilizes the instrumentation from here to here. It's how it marks with the CR bite in place. Right on. Okay. When we look at the markings with the CR bite in place, we see that the black marks basically on top of the center line, which is what we would want it to be. On the right side, the black mark is basically at the crosshairs. On the left side, it's about 1/4 millimeter off. The black mark is about 1/4 millimeter off vertically and about 1/2 millimeter anterior-posteriorly. So it doesn't quite mark right on the center line on the CR bite. Look real close. I didn't get the vertical line quite on here. So that might be causing a little bit of the difference there. But you can see the instrument does mark very, very close to the exact axis with the CR bite in place. Now, if this were a patient that we were treating, we would transfer the flags to the patient record card. For example, in some cases, I might have, I'm going to use a pen here just to put a mark to illustrate it. I might have a discrepancy of this nature. On the left side, the condyle is down, if that were the CO marking, the condyle is down 3 millimeters and back 2. And on the left side, it's down 2 and back 3. So that's a significant displacement of the condyle from CR to CO. And this gets to be critical from the standpoint of once that patient has a 3 millimeter vertical discrepancy, I'm beginning to think this is possibly a surgery case. Just from day one, I could begin to see that I've got a large enough discrepancy here that when I reposition the mandible, put the condyle in the fossa, and reevaluate my patient, there may be a significant enough discrepancy that orthodontically I can't get to an optimal treatment goal. The same way here, doctors don't realize how important this transverse measurement is. In this patient, we had about 1/10 of a millimeter discrepancy. Well, that's nothing. But once we get to about 5/10 of a millimeter, now I'm beginning to be worried. And if you're under 5/10 or less discrepancy transverse, that doesn't bother me so much. Over 5 millimeters, I'm beginning to be concerned. If you have a 8/10 or more discrepancy, 8/10 of a millimeter discrepancy, then you have most likely got condylar resorption in that joint. And so this is why all of this, all these measurements get to be extremely important in your initial records, because it gives you indications of things you may have missed in your initial exam. If I saw an 8/10 of a millimeter discrepancy and I didn't have adequate x-rays of the joints to really see if there's resorption and just what's going on in the joints, I would be getting them real quick, and probably MRIs also. So this kind of information is absolutely imperative. The biggest problem, in my opinion, in orthodontics, one of the biggest causes of failure in orthodontics is improper and/or incomplete diagnosis. That's why all of this diagnostic work we're doing here at the beginning is so important, is to get a complete diagnosis of our patient. For example, if we look at this patient very carefully, if you can get on these upper incisors, good, we can see there's attrition on the occlusal third of all 4 incisors. This patient had a very slightly underdeveloped maxilla and a little bit of a strong mandible. So that puts her in a very slight class 3 tendency, and her lower incisors are rubbing on the lingual of upper incisors all the time. And that's probably part of why she has the joint problem she has. Secondly, when we look very closely at the right cuspid, we can see that there's attrition of the cuspid here. That tells me, I'm sorry, here, there's on the mesial incline of this cuspid, there's attrition. That tells me there's balancing interferences on the left side. All I have to do is be able to locate them. You cannot find that kind of information in the mouth. You can't find the balancing interference in the mouth because the neuromuscular mechanism has programmed the patient to go around the interference when you try to demonstrate it in the mouth. So if I come back and start looking at the molars back here and start looking for attrition, it's very, very clear on the lower second molars. When you look at the lower second molars again, can you see how that flat plane there where she's attrition there on those second molars? Very, very clear. And she balances on the cuspid and she works on the second molar. But let's see if we can pick up the balancing interference. So to do that, I'm going to move the articulator, so I have to release, I have to put my centric latch down and release the centric lock so the articulator now, the top can move side to side. First, I'm just going to go over and I'm going to set it. I'm going to put my cuspids, the attrition area of the cuspids, together. And when you look over, okay, so if I put the areas, you can see on the lower cuspid also. Can you see this flattened area here? Very, very flat area there, where the upper cuspid's been working on it. Now, if I put those together, those two areas of attrition, as best I can, and come over here, you can see the balancing interferences on the last molar. You can see how the molars are hitting. let's see if we look at the, and now that we look at the left cuspid, the attrition is there too. So if I put the areas of attrition together on the cuspids, and come over to the right side, you see the balancing interferences on the right side also. So we're beginning to see why she's having problems. These measurements we did today are estimates. Remember, the ear bow is an estimate. It is an estimated axis. And that's why this only gives us clues as to what might be wrong and how we might be able to treat it.